Hi, welcome to another episode of the NPC Sports Podcast. Logan, Dakota, there is so much going on this week. Red Sox season obviously starts, but shockingly, that's kind of like last on our hierarchy of things to talk about. We might not even get to the Celtics sale today, which is obviously a huge issue for green teamers. But the hot news is that the Patriots actually made a substantive offensive addition, signing Stefon Diggs to a 3-year deal. This was kind of a surprise given their lack of activity on the offensive market up until this point. Finally, they have a number one, ostensibly, receiver for Drake May. Logan, Dakota, kind of what was your initial reaction? And now that you've kind of had the night to digest it, what are your thoughts?
Leaving it for me, Dakota.
Yep.
So it represents a few different things. For one, I guess there is the discussion about do free agents actually want to come to New England? Let's talk about the weather, the fact that the team has stunk over the last half decade, the taxes, things like that. So the fact that they did get someone who is one of the, at least in his generation, one of the better players at his position is not an insignificant development. Now, you are getting the back end of his career, and I am curious who they were bidding against because I feel like ordinarily, we didn't hear much about a bidding war for Stefon Diggs. So the fact that he's going to get what, 27 million guaranteed, 26 million guaranteed, something like that is a little surprising. So I would just be curious to know who they were bidding against. But as far as the on-field product, I think that if nothing else, it's good that there is a clearly delineated number one receiver. I feel like for the last 4 years, it's been like the who's the ace Red Sox. And basically, it's just like maybe it'll be Jalen Polk, maybe it'll be N'Keal Harry, maybe it'll be whoever, but you didn't actually have a clear cut number one go to guy. And they needed that. And so even if Stefon Diggs is taking a step back, I mean, he's coming off an ACL injury. He should at least be the security blanket that any young quarterback would benefit from. I mean, you look at before he left for the Bears, like Keenan Allen was a good one for Justin Herbert early on in his career. So I can see that type of situation a little bit. So overall, a net positive. But, I don't think that they're going to get the transformative receiver that he was with the Vikings or the early stage of his Bills run. But nevertheless, I mean, you can't sit here and say the Patriots don't get enough top end talent. They don't sign enough. They clearly can't draft receivers. So it's good that they're at least getting proven commodities in free agency. So overall, favorable, but I do think there's a chance that they kind of bid against themselves and overpaid, which is what you have to do when you're a bad team.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot to this, right? But I think as far as who they were bidding against, the reality is free agents can't take visits with other teams until the start of the new league year, which was what, like the 13th or the 14th. So no team was gonna start bidding for him or trying to sign him until they got him in for visits to look at the medicals. So the Patriots were the first visit that he took. And to me, I mean, they clearly wanted him, so I think they were just being aggressive to make sure he didn't go on other visits. He's Stefan Diggs. Like I'm sure he would have had other visits, but no team was going to enter that bidding process until they got a chance to look at his knee. So I don't really like worry about that part of it too much. What I do wonder is, I do think the storyline about him being like a bad presence for Drake May or a bad locker room presence, like I think that's overblown. If Drake May can't handle one guy who's like maybe a little annoying, then what are we talking about? But I think Stefan Diggs had a great relationship with Josh Allen for the most part up until the end, and then all indications are he was great in Houston last year. Everything you read is really positive, but to that end, I do wonder, why weren't the Texans in on this then? Because they're not getting Tank Dell back anytime soon, so they needed another, high ceiling wideout. They have championship aspirations right away, so if they were comfortable with Diggs medicals and they liked how he was as a locker room fit last year and believe he still had something in the tank, why wouldn't they just make this deal? 26 million is not much. So I wonder about that. But as far as the money, like I have no issue with it because if you were going to do this, it was always going to be a 2-year deal because you just don't know what you're going to get in year one. Like if you want Stefan Diggs, you're hoping you can at some point get an approximation of prime Stefan Diggs. And it's just unlikely that we get that this year because he's not going to really be able to start practicing with Drake May until, I don't know, October. Like, I don't believe Adam Schefter's report about him being ready for week 1 at all. So it's probably more like October. They have no chemistry, no history. So, like, I think this is all about 2026, really, hoping you build some sort of foundation this season. So, I think 26 million's fine. Interestingly, the contract details for Cooper Kupp just came out. That was 3-year, 45 million deal, but it was 17.5 million guaranteed, and it's really all in the first year. So for all intents and purposes, that's a 1-year, 17.5 million deal for Cooper Kupp. So would you rather have Cooper Kupp for 1 year at 17 and a half, or Stefon Diggs for 2 years at 13 for each? I think I don't know. I think it's an open. I think you could debate either side of that. I'd probably go Stefon Diggs because he looked like he had more in the tank before he got hurt than Cooper Kupp. And the other comp is DeAndre Hopkins, who his deal with the Titans was for 2 years, but it was effectively a 1-year, like 11 million deal. So this is kind of like right around, they did a second year of it, but this is kind of the going rate for, receivers over 30 coming off injury, showing signs of decline. So yeah, I mean, I think they were a little aggressive, but I don't think it's egregious. They had the money, they spent it, and that's something they had to do. So I think overall, I think it's all positives. I'm just tempering expectations for this season because I think it's just optimistic to think they're going to get a lot out of them.
Quickly on your hypothetical, I think that's easily Diggs. Way more of a track record.
Over who?
Over Kupp. If you're talking the same contracts, like way more of a track record. The injury history with Kupp's way more documented at this point.
Yeah, and I just think, Kupp was losing a lot of speed last year.
Yeah.
And I forget who, I think it was ESPN's metrics, but they showed like, they have that advanced analytic that tracks, how open receivers get. And like in Kupp's year when he won the receiving Triple Crown and set all those records, he was like third in the getting open. And then the next year he went down to like 103. And then last year it was like 145. So like there's a pretty clear track record there. Like for me, the Kupp signing would have been more about like they need an adult in the room and someone who, I mean, he still has something in the tank, but they needed an adult to show Jalen Polk and Javon Baker and even Pop Douglas like how to be professional receivers. I do still think Stefon Diggs can be that. Like I think he can help inspire those guys. I don't think he's under any illusion or delusion that he's the receiver he was at 26, 27. So I buy into the fact that he can actually be a net positive for the locker room because I think that stuff about him being a diva receiver is a little overblown because all receivers are divas. So
does this suggest any potential change to their draft strategy in your guys' eyes?
I don't think so because you're not drafting Stefon Diggs to be like I think this goes back to Logan, you made the point that he's the clear number 1 receiver. I mean, I would disagree. I think he's the 2, or he should be the 2. Like, I think number 1 is open. Stefon Diggs is number 2. Pop Douglas 3. Mac Hollins 4. And then number 5 is like, it's Booty, it's Baker, it's Polk, it's Bourne. I think Bourne feels like prime trade bait, but Stefon Diggs, number 1, obviously the injury, and number 2, he's not a prototypical boundary receiver, which is what they need as the number 1 X receiver. So, I don't think it changes really anything they should do in the draft. If they want to go target someone like Ted McMillan, trade down for him, I think that could certainly be in play. And then, the Travis Hunter is just, it's hard to speculate about that because we just don't know if they view him as a corner or a receiver. So
yeah, I disagree on the number 1 receiver thing only because like all right, you want to have an open competition for that spot, like sure. What have you seen? Like if you're signing Stefon Diggs at this point to be your number 2, you've got a lot more work to do, at least in the draft.
I think if you're signing him to be your if you're signing a 31-year-old wideout, 32 in December, coming off a torn ACL to be your number 1 receiver, you have a lot of work to do in the draft.
I mean, the room was a disaster in the first place. I mean, Mac Hollins hardly solves anything. We've been trading Kendrick Bourne since he signed here. So, I'm having a tough time following your logic that so should number 1 just be up for grabs? And it's like, all right, Jalen Polk's got to step up, or Javon Baker's got to step up, or Booty's got to be more consistent.
I'm just saying, I think it I don't think this signing precludes them from still exploring a trade for Brandon Ayuk or AJ Brown, or an aggressive play in the draft for a first-round receiver, whether that's because they're not taking Ted McMillan at 4. And I don't think Travis Hunter is like being drafted to be the number 1 receiver. that, I don't think you can like bank on it like that. So I think it would be either trade back for someone like McMillan or trade back into the first round for some of these other guys. I'm just saying, like, signing Diggs, I don't think at all prevents them from being aggressive to find a true future number one receiver, whoever that is. Like, I think they could still absolutely be on Ayuk, Brown, or a top wideout.
I mean, AJ Brown's a different conversation because that's an obvious upgrade. But like, I don't know, and Brandon Ayuk, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I think Brandon Ayuk's number one receiver.
Okay.
I'm just saying, before he got hurt, he was I mean,
okay, but we're talking about injury concerns. So you're worried about signing.
yeah, but he's 26. He's 26,
Yeah.
and ACLs don't really they're not what they once were. I mean, the Patriots are telling you that by signing a 31-year-old receiver. I think the concern with Brandon Ayuk is that a year ago or last August, he basically said he didn't want to be here. I mean, that probably was more about him trying to force his way to Pittsburgh, but the Patriots were aggressive for that. And then the word is Gerard Mayo tried to call Brandon Ayuk, and he just wouldn't pick up the phone. So do you turn around and make that guy the highest paid player on your team? Probably not, right? So I think that's the issue there. But as far as talent, I mean, we're talking about a guy. I mean, I think there was a year ago, ESPN came out with that poll where they polled executive scouts and coaches for all 32 teams, and they ranked each position. I think Brandon Ayuk was 6th on that. And so, like, I don't think he would be that on this year's list because of the injury, but I mean, he would still by far and away be their number one top franchise wideout if they got him.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
In the interest of keeping things moving, because we have a lot of time to talk about the Patriots, want to segue. You mentioned now you're a guy who doesn't always look like he wants to be somewhere. Let's talk about a couple members of the local hockey team, particularly the goalie, who often look like they don't want to be there. So since the Bruins trade, not quite fire sale, but something approaching it, they are entering Wednesday. I think they've lost 6 straight, 9 of 11 of their last 11. I believe they are 6 points out of a wild card spot, but the teams they are chasing look like they have 2 games in hand, if I am reading the standings correctly. Mathematics aside, I mean, it seems like, it's over, and the last few losses have not particularly looked like a team that is fully committed. Initially, I know we were a little bit high on what they might look like moving forward. Maybe that Brad Marchand was a problem in the room for some of these players. It looks like it is anything but that. So what have you guys seen, or mercifully, if you're like me and you don't stay up for these 10 o'clock games in San Jose, not seen from the Bruins in the last couple weeks?
I mean, they can't score. They can't defend. When they do defend, their goalie gives up good opportunities. Like, this is just a fully broken team, which further reiterates the need that they need just a complete front office reshaping. Because there's not a whole lot of help coming. This team's going to have to build through free agency. And then over the course of many years, the draft. They waited far too long to blow this thing up, and now they're pretty much devoid of talent. So I do stand by, I know that when we talked about this last time, I was a little bit more bullish on the Bruins because at that point they had just smacked the Lightning after the deadline, and then that thrilling win over the Panthers.
You prisoner of the moment takes? No way.
Whoa. Because what I was about to do is stand by the fact that I do think they needed more skill. I don't necessarily disagree with the premise of changing how they're operating in that way, but you have an interim coach. Everyone's checked out. You're not making the playoffs. Like, this team's definitely packing it in. I think all they needed was one losing streak of maybe a couple games to knock them off course. Like, they had to ride that Panthers win for a while, and they didn't. They showed who they are. So now you're in fact finding for the next week until the playoffs start. But yeah, I mean, I think they do need a stylistic shift, but that's not coming this year. They're just playing the string out.
In Logan's defense, and then Logan, I was aligned with you on this. The position was that if they played the way that they played against those 2 Florida teams the rest of the season, they were going to be at least intriguing to watch.
Yeah.
And intriguing to watch is much different than saying a team's going to be good. I think, you kind of alluded to it, Logan. They rode the Panthers win. I think that's the sign of a team that does not have an identity, where if something is going fairly well, like they can hang in there. They look like mentally, psychologically, they look like they're in it. But a team that doesn't really have an identity, like as soon as you have, maybe you don't get out to a good start, or the other team scores a couple early goals, you kind of just start to like, okay, well, we're going to get a paycheck anyway. So you just kind of slow down, and and the next thing you know, you've given up 7 goals. Whereas a team that does have an identity, it's like, okay, you give up 2-3 first period goals, you're still in it, you can still come back. This just strikes me as a team that they realize that there's not a whole lot left, either in the season or from a leadership standpoint in the dressing room, and it's like, let's just get to the end of this campaign. My concern is with the dressing room culture beyond this season, because this season is a lost cause, but like they're stuck with Swayman, and I don't even know that Swayman is an NHL goalie anymore. I mean, we always used to complain that Tuukka Rask was good for at least 1 bad goal every game. This season, Swayman's good for 2 or 3, sometimes 4, just like atrocious goals where you're like, what was he doing? Where was he on that? So I feel like there has to be a reset with him. It's like somehow. And I don't think that's like you can just trickle to the end of the season and come back next year and expect it to be good. I feel like something has to be done. Either like, you sit him down for the rest of this season, and you just kind of have him go home, or something of that nature. Because if not, it almost seems like he's like Chuck Knobloch, trying to throw to second base. You know what I mean? It's just like he's like forgotten how to do his job.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that would make you like give you reason for optimism there is like this happens to goalies. Like, I mean, wasn't Tuukka yeah, Bennington. I mean, like there are a ton of examples, and like even I mean, this might be I might have this wrong, but didn't like Tuukka Rask was good like his first year or something. I think when Tim Thomas was hurt, and then going in the next year, like Tuukka did not look good, and Tim Thomas got that job back and led him to the Stanley Cup. Like, I'm just saying like this does happen. I think maybe the answer is like just to your point, Ben, if nothing else, like go into next year and give him like real competition. What's the kid's name in the goalie prospect? Is it Busey?
Yeah, Brandon Bussey.
Bussey. So like I don't know how he's done this year. I'm not going to pretend to know, but like if they think he's got a shot, like like give Swayman some competition in camp so he doesn't feel like the job's just going to be handed to him. On that thing the other night with him trying to fight the guy and then Zadorov's comments after the game, I'm probably giving too much credit to them on this, but I do buy his explanation that like he just didn't want to hear any sort of positive slanted question after a loss that bad. It's like players do hate that. And like, I mean, I can't, how many times like going in after just another awful Patriots loss, and then someone asks David Andrews, David, how good was it to see DeMontre Jacobs go out there and hold his own today after being a healthy scratch 3 weeks in a row? And like, to his credit, he'd always answer it professionally, but you could tell he's like, what the hell are you asking me that for? No. And so like, I know it sounded bad, but I'm willing to buy into Zadorov's explanation that he was just annoyed at the question in general, but maybe I'm giving him too much.
The explanation. Just to correct, so anyone who didn't hear, Swayman challenged the other goalie to a fight. The refs kind of got in the middle of it and wouldn't let it happen. And afterwards, Zadorov was asked, like, was it good to see your goalie stand up for his teammate? And Zadorov said, "Is that what happened?" So, sorry, go ahead, Logan.
Yeah, he was like, "Is that what happened?" I don't know, no comment.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, as somebody who is signed to a long-term deal and was, thought to be part of the future of this generation of Bruins, you'd probably hope Zadorov answers that question a little better, even if he's pissed. To your point about David Andrews, Dakota. But yeah, I mean, I can't imagine any of them are thrilled with Swayman. So at the absolute
Right.
worst, it's just saying the quiet part out loud. Like I do subscribe to the theory that it was weird timing for Swayman, and it certainly doesn't help when you try and do that and then you go into the break and on the other side proceed to get your doors kicked in. Like if you're gonna do that, you better not give up 4 goals in the third period or whatever it was. Um, and to the point about is Swayman even an NHL goalie? One thing that I think is kind of worth contrasting is I remember when Linus Olmark was still with the Sabres when he went to arbitration with them one year and they were like 4 million apart in their number, which you never see figures that far apart in NHL arbitration. The Sabres wanted to give him like I think it was like 1.5 and he wanted 5 or something. Um, and a lot of people were like, how can there be such a chasm in what these guys are asking? And the point was that even though Linus Olmark's save percentage numbers, goals against numbers were a little bit inflated, he was facing a goddamn firing squad every night. And it was telling that when Linus Olmark came over to the Bruins, he was immediately a Vezina caliber goalie because all the underlines were there because he proved even on a bad team, he will be worthwhile. He'll still be bad, but he will stop it from getting worse. I think it's very telling that in a bad year for the Bruins, Swayman has only made things worse. He has not prevented things from getting any worse. He has contributed to things falling. And I think that's where you can kind of separate the franchise goalie versus was he just benefiting from only having to play 41 games a year.
Yeah, I also think like still a young player, right? And I think young guys are especially susceptible to like, everyone says rising tide raises all ships. Well, it goes the other way too. And when it's all going bad, I think it just kind of goes bad for everyone. So like I'm by no means giving up on the guy. And like I know I just brought up another poll, but for whatever reason I do put a lot of stock in these polls that come out when that poll executives and scouts and coaches. And the Athletic had one in like mid-January that was like it was polling all the main people in the NHL on goalie tiers. And there was tier one, which is like Vezina candidates, and there were like 4 guys. And then tier two was high end starters, and Swayman was like the third guy mentioned. So like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that opinion's changed a lot since then because it has been that bad the last 2 months. But a lot of people really think highly of him. It's just, I don't know. That maybe he seems like it might be a weird dude. Like I don't know. But goalies are also weird, so I don't know if that's a knock against him. So I don't. I'm with you. Like I could go either way on this. I could sign up for like sending him a harsh lesson, or I could sign up for just chalking it up to a bad year. But the other big thing that I'm curious about with the Bruins going forward, and I'll be curious for your take, John, is what happens at head coach. Like I think it's easy to assume that Sacco doesn't get brought back as the full-time head coach. But what do you think? Do you think he deserves another shot, or is it just like it's the writing on the wall?
Um, I think at this point you probably just go with a clean break. I mean, he took over. There's the period of time where he coached them. What was that? 2023 when Cassidy got COVID. Not 2023. This would have been 2021 maybe. And then he's gotten this opportunity now, and it's like he was fine as a stopgap when he had a much better team at his disposal. I just you're probably getting a temporary coach right now. Like this team needs a rebuild. I can't imagine that this job is going to be all that attractive. If they think Joe Sacco is going to be like the guy that they need to help develop and bring along younger players, then that like maybe he fits that role, but you should at least go and look at what else is out there. Because they're definitely not going to make a premier hire. I mean, if the Rangers can't Peter Laviolette, I don't think he's going to be coming to the Bruins or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we sooner saw like a Jay Leach type end up becoming, he coached in Providence forever. He was on the Kraken staff for a while when they first expanded into the league. So I can sooner see someone more with that type of makeup instead of someone who's a bit more of a like NHL assistant, someone with a little more recent AHL experience. But I don't know. It's gonna have to probably be a younger guy who's gonna be there to help rebuild.
Yeah, part of me is fearful of them doing like another overcorrection on the coaching front, and like this wouldn't happen, but like if Tortorella somehow shook free again, like if they would
He
overcorrect and go
probably
something like
will.
that. Yeah, he
Like
might.
I
You
mean,
know,
he's talking himself out of Philly right now because
is
they
that what they
stink as
need
well.
here? I don't know.
That I don't think that would work here, especially not at this juncture. I'm just concerned that the Bruins are going to tell themselves a story that, okay, we get McAvoy back, we get Lindholm back, we're going to be way better next year, and they just try and run it back. And like that might be the type of thing that leads to a Joe Sacco rehiring. But like this team needs to stop putting off the inevitable. Like Pasternak, Swayman for better or for worse, and McAvoy are on under contract long enough that they will be here for the other side of rebuilds. Like you need to stop putting this off.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to circle back to my comment about Swayman, whether or not he's an NHL goalie, I guess what I'm getting at is if nothing changes, I think he's tracking towards potentially not being an NHL goalie. But if something does change, whether that's here, maybe it's a change of scenery. We've seen that you guys want to mention a lot of this has happened before to other goalies. Like a lot of times, what solved it for those goalies was going to a different club. So, yeah, I think that I think that that's kind of team wide. That if everything is doing is going tracking the same direction, for the club in general, I don't know if you can fix this without institutional changes. Oh, I just lost your guys's. You guys still hear me? All right. Well, we work to get these guys back. One moment.
Automatically remain that. And so, yeah, benching has to be on the table, not just giving him the job right out of the gate next year has to be on the table. Yeah, no, I don't think he meant like send him back down to the AHL or
No,
anything.
no, no. Of course not.
It also looks like Ben's back here.
I'm
So I
back.
think we admittedly have no idea whether the recording kept going or not, or we might have to piece this together. But
I don't think it did. I lost you guys, but the great part was that my point was made amazingly. All right. So let's move forward to the Red Sox. We've wasted a lot of oxygen and carbon dioxide on the Red Sox's roster this spring training. Opening day is essentially upon us. Kristian Campbell, it seems, is going to be at second base. Marcelo Mayer and Roman Anthony are going to be in the minor leagues. The way that everything's come together in the past week plus, where do you guys sit on this opening day roster, allowing for the fact that it is probably not going to look entirely the same come May 1st, June 1st, July 1st, September 1st?
I feel great about it, honestly. And maybe I'm too optimistic, but the more I've thought about it, like the only real issue I see is the Devers thing and whether that becomes a distraction and turns into something bad. But if that just plays out and it's fine, I'm really really high on this team. The more I've thought about it, like we spent so much time about whether Kristian Campbell deserves the job, this and that, but like the Red Sox, one of the biggest ways they are improved from recent seasons is just their depth. I mean, yeah, the starting rotation's much better. I think the bullpen has the potential to be really good if everything clicks. But from a depth standpoint, it's like there's so much more well positioned to withstand big injuries than they were. Like if Trevor Story goes down, you have Marcelo Meyer or Ceddanne Rafaela. If Kristian Campbell's just not cutting it and he needs more time, I think David Hamilton is a really good stopgap, or you move Alex Bregman over to second base. I think Romy Gonzalez is a good depth player. And in the outfield, you have Duran, Abreu, and Rafaela. And if one of those guys gets hurt, you have the number one prospect in baseball ready to come up. Not to mention the fact that like their starting pitching depth already is showing up. Where you have three guys, it looks like that aren't going to be ready, and I think you feel pretty good about the two guys that are going to come in for the fourth and fifth spot. So, yeah, I just think they're so much more well positioned to handle bumps in the road or injuries or even a slow start this year than in years past. So I'm high on the Red Sox.
I'm so excited about Richard Fitz. Like that stuff plays. Like I think obviously he will probably get bumped into more of like a Josh Winkowski long relief role once guys start coming back. But I'm glad that he will get
I
at
don't
least
know
turn through the rotation.
if he can consistently hit, because the problem with him was like he had good stuff, but he wasn't missing bats, and part of that was like his fastball just wasn't good enough. It was like 93, 95 without good shape. Now it's like 96 to 98 with great shape, and it's getting a lot of swings and misses. And when that happens, your secondary stuff plays up so much better. And so, like, if that's legit, I mean, I think I could absolutely see him running with a fourth or fifth starter job. And then it
Yeah.
just comes down to, when the other guys are healthy.
Yeah, we'll see. I am equally optimistic on the Red Sox as you are. I still contend that they are not sending their best lineup out. Granted, they're putting Yoshida on the IL. I have already expressed my skepticism about that injury, but in any event, I still think their best lineup is with Bregman at second, Devers at third, and Yoshida as the DH. I don't think that's going to happen right now, so it is what it is. I think I want to speak for Ben, but I think Ben and I have been a little less bullish on Kristian Campbell as Dakota has, in part because, we're talking about someone who less than 2 years ago was a fourth round pick and not on a lot of radars. And now, he's a top 10 prospect in baseball and breaking camp as their second baseman. Agreed that, they have a worthwhile stopgap so they can try this, like David Hamilton, perfectly fine. Romy Gonzalez is perfectly fine. Cedon Rafael is perfectly fine. Like, they have the options there, but I still just wonder, we're talking about a guy who got off to a really bad start offensively this spring. Like, I know he can make loud contact. I know that he's turned things around in some ways, but I'm just curious to see how quick of a hook they have. Because to me, it's not that productive to have him up there for opening day if you're going to send him down in 10 days when he goes 0 for 15.
That won't happen. That won't happen. I mean, I think with him, it's gonna be about what are the at
I'll
bats.
remember that.
Yeah.
Well, and they're not going to send him down that quick. I mean, they'll give him at least a month. I mean, like remember Pedroia, remember Tristan Cassis, like his first
But
month a couple years ago.
I mean,
Like,
they're going to run out of chairs with all, I mean, Yoshida will eventually come back. Some of those pitching moves could end up shrinking the bench a little bit or changing the complexion of the bench a little bit.
yeah,
Um,
I just think that, again, it's what do the at bats look like? Like, I don't care about the baseball card stats. It's like a couple years ago, Tristan Cassis got off to that awful April, and people were talking about maybe sending him down or benching him for a little bit. But it was like if you looked at the at bats, he was showing a really good approach at the plate. He was taking a lot of pitches. He had a really sound approach. And a lot of the batted ball data was just bad luck. Like he was hitting it right at guys. Like it wasn't nearly as bad as the baseball card says.
so that's
So with Campbell, it's like if it's the same thing, like maybe he's not tearing the cover off the ball, but like there's more to it than that. And if they feel, I think that was what was going on this spring. Like the at bats early in the spring were bad, and then halfway through he took a turn and he started putting together really good at bats, and then the results started to follow. And I think that's what they want to see.
that concept flies in the face of the idea that the Red Sox are competing now.
Totally
Like
disagree.
the objective should be the playoffs, right?
Right, but you don't
And
need
that's
you don't
hold
need
on, hold on, hold on. If you listen, you might learn something. So
doubt it.
if
Doubt it.
if the objective, like the Tristan Casas point, is a very good one. That team wasn't expected to be good 2 years ago. So if you're intent on winning this year, I don't go have good at bats in Worcester. Like if he's not hitting well, then I think that like you have to pick a lane. This is what we have said the Red Sox refuse to do for years. Are you trying to give the kids a look or are you trying to win? And obviously, the intent now is to win. If that's the case, you're not letting Kristian Campbell strike out a bunch or struggle at the plate for a month if you think that if David Hamilton is sitting there not playing, like it's not going to work that way. So that makes me question the merits of even having him up here in the first place. Because it's like, go have your good at bats in Worcester, straighten that out. I'm totally fine with that. But the idea that he's just going to figure it out in the majors and they're going to give him all this leash, like, and again, we're talking about a guy who's probably going to hit eighth in the lineup, but at the same time, it's like they giving him all this runway to figure it out when you have perfectly acceptable replacements goes against this idea that it's like we're here to win and it's full throttle. to
No,
borrow it.
but I disagree because I think you want to strike a balance. Like if your bar is always all 9 guys got to be above average regulars right away, then when are you ever going to give a prospect a chance to develop? And so the problem is that in recent years the Red Sox have had too many black holes in the lineup. They've been giving too much time to too many guys to figure it out. You can have two, you can withstand two like guys really not holding their weight in the lineup. It can't get to 3, 4, let alone 5. Where like in 2022, right? They were letting Bobby Dalbec figure it out. They were playing Kike Hernandez through horrible struggles. They were running out Jackie Bradley Jr., Christian Arroyo, a lot of guys who were adding nothing, and it's like that's just too many. But 2 is fine, and I'm including. So I'm saying Rafaela and
Yeah.
Campbell, but I think Rafaela could have a good year, right? So I think good teams, which I think the Red Sox are, can afford to have 2 guys at the bottom of the lineup figuring it out. It just can't get to be any more than that. So like, yeah, if we get into the season and let's say like Willie Abreu is really struggling or something, well, I don't know, or maybe Connor Wong takes a huge step back, and then also Campbell and Rafaela aren't performing well. A change has to be made there, whether it's Campbell or it's Rafaela going super utility and Anthony coming up. So I just think it's kind of like it's 2 but no more. So yeah, I mean, I can see a situation where they kind of give up on him or send him down, but I think a lot of other things would have to be going wrong in the lineup for that to happen.
Not giving up on him by sending him
No, I
down
mean,
if he's
like not giving
struggling.
up, but you don't want to send a guy back down because you run the risk of torpedoing his confidence. Like
That's my point. Is there's no benefit to having him on the roster right now. Like maybe
unless you believe in
maybe
him,
he
they
goes
believe
off
in
and
him.
he's as MLB ready as people are suggesting he is. But it's like to me, there's far more of a likelihood that you tank this guy's confidence and you go and you let him get knocked around for 3 weeks or however long, and that blows up against you. So that's my trepidation.
Campbell's going to be an interesting litmus test for this whole launch angle revolution because you raise Casas as an example, and yeah, a lot of times what these launch angle guys struggle with when they first come up is velo, because what's the way that now that as a pitcher you battle the launch angle swing? It's with high hard fastballs. So I do think that there is a difference between a minor leaguer coming up and seeing that in the first time in July or August when those pitchers are a little bit worn down versus April when most people are fresh. So it will be interesting to see how he does. I do think he could be 0 for 15 with 11 strikeouts. But to that point, I don't think that means that he won't have been ready or shouldn't have had him up here, because he does need to see that at some point, like if he's going to have success. But I think it will be interesting because if he comes up and he does have success with that approach at the plate, I think it's a really good example that for some hitters, particularly ones that are mid-round draft picks and need to find a offensive approach that translates a little bit better to the major leagues, that can be effective. And then I think if he does struggle, it can be in the other direction. It can say, well, we have to keep in mind that, the a launch angle adjustment to the swing like the one that he had in 2024, the winter of 2023, can bear some fruit and have you a really quick spike. But in the long run, it's not necessarily for everybody. And I don't know if it's necessarily for a second baseman of his stature.
Yeah, I also think there's something to be said for, the fact that with the additions they made and the other players they've had emerge on the roster over the last couple of years, there's just not like a ton of pressure on him. Like he's going to put pressure on himself generally because he's a top prospect and you want to live up to that and everything. But he's not coming in here to hit in the middle of the lineup and like sort of save the Red Sox lineup, which is why I like the Bregman signing so much. Is it just allows Kristian Campbell to slot in where he should, which is 8th in the lineup and not expected to put up huge stats. He can find his way. But of course, on the extreme end, yeah, if he's really bad, then that changes the math. But, and I think he looked a lot more comfortable both in the field and at the plate after it started becoming clear that he was going to make the team. It looked like he was playing a bit more free. And so I think there's a chance he carries that into the regular season. But like I'm totally with you guys on the possibility that it goes the other way. I mean, there are how many examples of this happening with prospects. So by no means am I like he's gonna like sure thing he's gonna kill it. But I just think it's not a huge deal if he struggles right away. I think he at least gets a month.
I would not feel this way if it were Marcelo Meyer, and I don't know entirely why that is. But and maybe it's just because like Meyer's been around a little bit longer. Like the main knock against him has been injuries and things like that. But to me, it's like,
I think Campbell's older.
yeah, but he's been in the organization a little longer.
Right.
And I mean, playing pro level baseball is different. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's because Meyer has been more clearly identified as a middle infielder, like second base feels like a good fit for him. Maybe I'm, victim of the moment takes, like watching all the loud contact he's making and getting a little, intoxicated by that. Who knows? But I don't know. Also, we're talking about a 6-month difference between Kristian Campbell and Marcelo Meyer in age.
Right.
Um,
I do also like I've heard Lou Merlone talk a lot about this, and I agree with it that you know these three guys came into spring in different places, and I think there was a lot of pressure and attention on Campbell and Anthony as like these two top 10 prospects. Some think Campbell's ahead of Anthony. Both were being talked about as possibly making the opening day roster, and I think at times you saw them pressing a little bit. And trying to get comfortable, whereas Meyer came in and nobody was really talking about him. I mean, people were talking about him, but no one was thinking he was going to make the opening day roster, and I think people just wanted to see him healthy and playing again. And I think he just played a lot more free and relaxed, and that showed up on the field. Whereas I think it took a while for Anthony and Campbell to start settling in and not overthinking things so much.
A tease ahead to something. We don't have to get into it today, but I think the one area of this team where I feel like the floor is not a playoff caliber team is the bullpen.
Yep.
Every other area, I think ceiling is sky high, floor is at least wild card. But that is something that would bear watching. We should revisit that a week from now when we've had a couple games to observe, because especially with Chapman being named the closer, I think the ceiling could be high if everyone is healthy, everyone is actually throwing strikes. But I am a little concerned about where the floor of things could literally fall out from a lot of those pitchers. So just put a pin in that and just kind of like, I'm going to make a note for that to be on the docket for next week.
when
Yeah,
they signed him, I think my response was, I want him nowhere near the ninth inning.
Hey, you going there?
They
Yeah,
put a lot of eggs in the Liam Hendricks will be our ninth inning guy basket and did not expect him to get smacked this spring.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was the first episode. I'd said like I love Chapman as like your fireman in the seventh or your top lefty. I think that's a great spot for someone like him. I think I was on the show saying like they did not sign him to be their closer, and so that didn't bear out. So I'm concerned about that too. I just think like there's a non-zero chance that someone like Justin Slayton eventually seizes that job, or
I'd be fine with that.
Luis Guerrero is like doing it by July, or if need be, they have plenty of capital to go out and trade for somebody. So like I just don't see a scenario where they let the closing role be like a huge problem too deep in the season.
All right. We're in the home stretch now for our Behind the Keyboard segment. We have a simple one this week. And this is one we will probably revisit a bit as we all have a chance to think about it a little bit more as things come up. I just wanted to ask you guys generally, when you say, I cover sports, what in your mind is the number one biggest misconception about covering sports from folks in fandom?
That I can get ticket deals.
I was wondering if you were going to say that. I feel like that one's so overstated sometimes. I was like, I can't possibly say that.
But I think that, and then I still like at least once or twice a month have someone asking me, and then people ask me about Celtics too. I'm like, what? I don't cover the Celtics. I don't cover anybody right now. I'm unemployed. But it's like, yeah, everyone seemed whether it's free tickets or a ticket deal or just all this stuff. Like, no, it would be unethical, like for me to have some sort of hookup like that through the team. And beyond that, like it's fantasy land. Like I'm not gonna get free tickets.
I mean, some teams like put the clamps on players with how much they can request. And the thought that it's like, yeah, freaking Cranker from Nesson.com is gonna get, 4 seats to Patriots Jets is just yeah.
I think the other one I was gonna say, because that one I agree with you, that one is a little overstated. My other one was just like and I don't know if like the casual fan feels this way, but I know like some sort of hardcore fans, like, there's that really angry Patriots fan community that I think a lot of us have seen that love to say this, that like we're all in the pockets of the crafts, or that like, it's like we can all be bought and had by like, a year ago the Patriots did an off the record mixer where we had all off record conversations with the new coaching staff and had like hors d'oeuvres and stuff like that. And like some rumor got out there that there was beer, which was not true. There was no beer. It was Sprite. And people think that like we all just like carry the water for the team because we get free pizza and free food and stuff like that. And like, or that, we're not going to criticize the team or be negative because we're like beholden to Patriots PR, which is just like not the case. Like they're not going to pull your credential. That's not going to happen. Sure, is there a balance or a line to walk with, if you're trying to get source information and talking to people and they're going to give you something, but it's kind of a two-way street in some cases, of course. But as far as like freedom to report negatively on the team, like we all have it, and they're not going to pull your credential over it. So that whole thing is totally overstated.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that component, but that's a good one, because one of my pet peeves is when I see people talking about like, oh, they're just doing it for the clicks. I'm like, oh, they just did that for the clicks. And it's like, I only know how a handful of outlets run, right? Like firsthand. I don't know if I've ever had a boss say to me, you need to do this so we can get some clicks. Like yeah, so this might be where we start to disagree a little bit, because I think there's a difference between saying people are interested in this and we need to follow this trend and produce as much content around this as we can, versus you got to do this for the clicks. Like, I feel like the way it's produced to that is very different. And a good example, this is not sports related, but it's like when there's a plane crash, you will notice in the weeks afterwards, you will hear about every freaking plane crash in the country, in the world, because clearly that's what everyone is reading about afterwards. And I think that there's a difference between, oh, they're just writing this for clicks around like literal hard news and things like that, versus like, the desperate for clicks thing just pisses me off sometimes, because there's no way to guarantee clicks. Even if you write the most clickbaity thing in the world, there's no way to guarantee it.
Well, Logan, the other thing I think is when like readers or fans complain about doing it for clicks, where do they think clicks come from? Like the clicks come from people like you, like them,
engaging
clicking
with it, yeah.
on the article. Like it's not like you write a clickbaity article and all of a sudden it gets a million. No, it has a million clicks because a million people clicked on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when people are like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about this or that or whatever, I always say to them, well, people need to stop reading about it and I'll stop writing about it. Because it's like, it's not clickbaity. It's not beating a story to death if people care about it. Like, and there were plenty of times that I was sitting around at Nesson being like, I can't believe I'm about to write another freaking rumor post off of this guy or whatever. But if people are reading it, then clearly there's an audience for it. And it's like, as we talk about journalism dying, there's nothing wrong with targeting an audience with content that clearly they care about.
Let's do clickbait another time. Because I want to talk about
aggregation and people in the industry bagging on aggregation.
Because I think we have a lot of stuff to say about that. It could be a whole episode. I'm going to say the biggest misconception that I run into is just the nature of the work. So many people that when I talk to you the first time, they think it's like, when you go to a game, like you'll leave home at 5:30 for a 7 p.m. game, and then you sit with your buddies and you eat popcorn and you drink a beer and you watch, and then afterwards you go and you talk to the players. People would be really surprised sometimes when I'd be like, hey, I'm covering a game tonight, I'm heading in at like 3:30 in the afternoon. They're like, what time's the game today? It's like, yeah, well, I gotta get there early. Like, I gotta get set up, make sure I get a seat in that minuscule media room. Got stuff to do. So it's like there's coaches, locker room availability, and then afterwards, there until midnight. Sometimes later if the star players are deciding not to come out until like 12:30 a.m. And so that I think is the big thing. It's just the nature of what the job is it's not just like kind of like hanging out watching the game and then you get to like fire off a quick blog post. It's like
A few takes.
yeah, you got to get there early. You got to there's a lot of hanging around and trying to see what you can do. A lot of waiting for people to get done showering. So that I think is the number one misconception that I run into. Definitely the ticket thing as well.
Yeah, I think, and I was thinking that too, and it really just similar to what you said is it's not glamorous. Like for some people, for Stephen A. Smith, it's probably very glamorous, but like for the average person, especially today when the job security sucks, it can be highly stressful. It pays like shit. Like in my case, as someone who was a beat reporter, like yeah, was it fun to fly around the country and do all this stuff? Of course. Like I'm not first world problems. Like it was cool, but it was stressful. It's like a lot of really awful connecting flights and long layovers, and like you're only in that city for like a day and a half or 2 days max, and you're rushing the whole time, and
Poor
getting food on
thing.
it. No, I'm just saying, but it's stressful. Like it's not like you get to the city and just go unpack your bags and then go to the local Six Flags or something. Like you're
Yeah, you
maybe
go to
some are,
Disney.
but
Like
Everyone
any
knows
adult
that.
does, immediately beeline for the Six Flags.
or the bar. Like I'm just saying, it's hard work. It's kind of constant work. You're never truly off. You're always logging on in tough spots, and even in the situations like where you do get to travel around and cover the team around the country, like you're away from your family a lot, especially in the case of baseball writers, and it's a lot of long nights. Like, and again, these days for bad pay and bad job security. So I think it's not glamorous. Is it fun? And does it beat being a janitor, as Bill Belichick would say? Of course. But it is a grind, and sometimes it is not all that fun.
You just tell on yourself, like, would the wheels touch down? You'd be like, man, I have to do this Caden Ellis crank, but Magic Mountain's really calling my name. Like,
I would do both. I found a way to
yes.
do both. I found a way to do both. Pull down the tarmac, do the Patriots practice squad elevation, and then be like, yeah, what's the top tourist trap in Cleveland? I gotta go check it.
Well, I will say, we've run short of time. Homework assignment is look up what the Six Flags stand for. That's an eye-opening little research project. If you look into that, because I think that the first Six Flags was in Texas. If that's a hint for you.
Yeah. I've been to that Six Flags.
So yeah,
Is that the
what
one
are the
by-
Six Flags in Six Flags?
Over
What do they
Texas.
represent? The original.
Is that the
but
one by Jerry World? Or
Yeah,
is it,
it's the one in Arlington.
I drove by that one. It's weird. Yeah, it's right by the stadium.
Yeah, they have some of the old stuff still there. It's kind of a weird park.
But for Logan, Dakota, this has been Ben. Thank you for joining us again on another week of the NPC podcast.